Hello, everybody. All right. Just getting the link so people can join us. Getting the link up so people can join us. Getting the link up so people can join us. Nice. There we go. Great. Okay, sorry about that. Just moving things around. People joining us now, so great. Appreciate it. All 7 of you. The end of Theodore Boone. Oh my God, looking ahead. Theodore Boone's second book is The Abduction. And of course, who got abducted? April Fenimore. There's a one-page thing about it. I'm not going to be reading the Theodore Boone books. You can get them. They're not expensive. And the library has them too. But there's 6 of them. And some of our classmates have them. Some people might even be willing to lend some of their other copies. But the second book, The Abduction, is The Abduction of April. I have a preview page here. The Abduction of April Fenimore took place in the dead of night, sometime between 9:15 p.m. and when she last spoke with Theo Boone, 3:30 a.m., when her mother entered their bedroom and realized she was gone. The abduction appeared to have been rushed. Whoever took April did not allow her to gather her things. Her laptop was left behind. Though her bedroom was fairly neat, there was some clothing strewn about. Obviously, it has to do with the divorce. Could be her parents. One of the other parent or something. Apparently, April's been abducted, and the police would like to talk to Theo. And that's all. They just gave a page-and-a-half preview. Okay, now we have 15 people watching. I'll get on with the story. That was the first page of the second book, which I'm not going to read. Okay, chapter 21. Okay. Sorry, chapter 21. Judge Gantry waited until dark, early Sunday evening, before going for a long walk. He lived a few blocks from the courthouse, in an old house that had been handed down from his grandfather, himself also a distinguished judge. Whoa. He roamed the streets in the center of Strattonburg early in the mornings and in the late of evenings. On this night, he needed fresh air. He needed time to think. The Duffy trial had consumed the weekend. He spent hours buried in the law books looking for an answer. It still eluded him. A heated argument raged within himself. This is Judge Gantry he's talking about. This is, a heated argument raised within himself. Why should he disrupt a properly tried case? Why should he declare a mistrial when nothing had gone wrong? No rules had been broken. No ethics violated. Nothing. In fact, with 2 fine lawyers doing battle, the trial had sailed along smoothly. His research had revealed no similar case. Judges are big on that. If there's a case that was similar to it, it sets a precedent. The lights were on at Boone and Boone. At 7:30, as promised, Judge Gantry stepped onto the small front porch and knocked on the door. It was opened by Marcella Boone, who said, Well, good evening, Henry. Come on in and join us. Good evening, Marcella, said Judge Gantry. I haven't seen this office in 20 years. Well, you should stop by more often, Henry. She closed the door behind them. Judges and lawyers are getting familiar with each other. Judge Gantry wasn't the only one having a brisk walk in the early evening. A man named Paco, P-A-C-O, Paco, was out for a stroll too. Paco wore a dark jogging suit, running shoes. He had a radio. He kept his distance. And since the judge never even thought about being followed, he was very easy to trail. They roamed through the streets of central Strattonburg, one man deep in serious thought and oblivious to anyone around him, the judge. The other a block behind, carefully stalking as the shadows grew long and the days disappeared. When Henry Gantry walked into Boone and Boone after dark, Paco jogged by the office. He got the name, he got the street number, and he kept going until he was around the corner. Then he clicked on a button on a two-way radio, and he said, "He's inside. He's at the Boones." "Okay, I'm close by." The response came from Private Investigator Omar Cheap. Moments later, Cheap picked up Paco, and they turned onto Park Street. When the Boone and Boone building was visible, they quietly eased into the parking place far down the street. Cheap turned off the lights in the engine and rolled down his windows for a smoke. "Did you see him go in?" "No, I saw him turn off the sidewalk and head for the front door. I know he's in there. It's the only place open along here." Very strange. It was Sunday night, and the other office buildings were dark and deserted. Only the Boone firm showed signs of activity. All of it downstairs, the lights appeared to be on. Paco asked, "What are they doing?" "I'm not sure," said Omar Cheap. "The Boones were in Gantry's office Friday. The whole family, which makes no sense because Gantry's very busy. They're not criminal lawyers, too, you know. He drafts deeds, and she handles divorces. There's no reason to barge into Gantry's office in the middle of a murder trial. And the kid, I don't get it. Why should parents take the kid out of school to see Gantry? The kid's been hanging around all week. He's been snooping this trial. I've seen him." "This is Theo you're talking about?" asked Paco. "Yep, Theo. Kid thinks he's a lawyer. He knows every cop, he knows every judge, he knows every court clerk. He hangs around courtrooms. Pretty funny for a kid, huh? He probably knows more about law, actually, than some lawyers. He and Gantry are pals, too. He goes to see Gantry with his parents, and suddenly Gantry decides not to hold court on Saturday. After promising all week that's what he was going to do. So something's going on here, Paco. It's not in our favor either." "You talked to Nance? You talked to Mr. Duffy?" "Not yet. Here's what we do. I would almost send you up there to poke around the building, look inside, see who's there, but it's risky. Too risky. They see you, they get spooked, they stop whatever they're doing, they call the cops. It is Judge Gantry, you know. I'll call Gus and I'll get the van. We can park it closer up the street, and when they come out, we can take pictures. I want to know who's in there." "Who do you think?" "I don't know. I'll bet $100 in the Boone. It's the Boone family, and the Gantry are not in there playing cards. Something's going on in there. I don't like the feel of it." Judge Gantry walked to the library inside the office, where Mr. Boone, Ike, and Theo were all waiting. The long table that dominated the room, covered with books, maps, notepads, gave the impression a lot of work was underway. Everyone shook hands. They said their hellos. There was some small talk about the weather, but with important matters looming, the chit-chat did not last long. "Needless to say," said Judge, after they were all seated, "this meeting is off the record. We're doing nothing wrong, though, mind you, since you're not involved in the case. See, if they were involved in the case, it would be illegal for them to meet, but since they're not involved with the case, they can meet. But I can hear a lot of questions being asked if word got out. Do you understand? So, "Of course, Henry," said Mrs. Boone. "No problem," said Ike. "Not a word," said Woodspoon. "Yes, sir," said Theo. "Good. Now that you have something to show me. The three adult ones looked at Theo, who immediately jumped to his feet. His laptop was on the table in front of him. Of course, he's like really good with the laptop. And slides, like you're doing. Your presentation, he's got that down. He touched a key, and a large photo appeared at the digital widescreen whiteboard at the end of the room. Theo held a laser pointer and directed the red light at the photo. This is an aerial photo of the 6th fairway at the creek course. Over here is the Duffy home. Over here, in the trees of this dogleg, which is, again, a fairway that's crooked, is where the witness was sitting and having lunch. He pressed another key and a photo appeared. This is a photo we took yesterday morning at the golf course. The witness was sitting on the stack of treated timbers next to the dry stream bed, completely hidden from view. However, as you can see, the witness had perfect view of the homes on the other side of the fairway 100 yards away. And you know for certain this is exactly where he was? Oh, yes, sir, we do. Can you reconstruct the time? Yes, Your Honor, we can. Theo, drop the Your Honor stuff, okay? For now. Oh, for the time being. Okay. Another photo, an aerial photo. Theo beamed the laser light at a building. This is the maintenance shed, not too far from the woods from the 6th fairway. The lunch break began at 11:30. 11:30 on the dot because the supervisor runs a tight ship, and he expected workers to check in at 11:30, eat quickly, and be back on the job at noon. Half an hour. Our man liked to sneak away from the others, eat by himself, say his prayers, and look at the photo of his family back home. He's very homesick. As you can see, it's a short walk through the woods to his favorite lunch spot. He estimates that he was halfway through his lunch break when he saw the man enter the Duffy home. So around 11:45. Yes, sir, and as you know, the pathologist put the time of death at approximately 11:45. I know that. And the man who entered the house and left it before your witness finished his lunch break? Yes, sir. The witness says that he usually heads back to the maintenance shed a few minutes before noon. On this day, he saw the man come out of the house before he finished his lunch break. He estimates the man was in the house less than 10 minutes. I have one very big question, said good Judge Gantry. Did this witness see the man leave the house with a bag or a sack or anything that might have held stolen loot? The testimony is that several items were taken, 2 small handguns, some of her jewelry, and at least 3 of his expensive watches. Did the witness see this stuff hauled away? I don't think so, said Theo very gravely. And I've thought about this for hours. My best guess is that he stuffed the guns under his belt, hid them with his sweater, and put everything else in his pockets. What kind of guns? Said Mr. Boone. A 9mm and a snub-nosed .38. It would be easy to hide them under a sweater. And the watches and the jewelry? Rings, necklaces, 3 watches with leather bands, easily could fit in the front pockets of a pair of slacks. And this stuff was never found? Asked Mrs. Boone. Nope. They're probably at the bottom of one of those lakes out here at the golf course, Ike said with a nasty grin. You're probably right, said Judge Gantry, to the amazement of everyone else. This stone-faced judge, who never leaned to one side or the other, just tipped his hand. He thought Pete Duffy was guilty after all. What about the gloves, he asked. Come on, what about these gloves? Theo picked up a small brown box, sat it on the table, and pulled out the Ziploc bag holding the 2 golf gloves. He placed them in front of Judge Gantry, and for a second or two, everyone just stared, as if they were a bloody butcher's knife. Theo pressed a key, and another photo appeared on the screen. This is the 14th tee box, the South 9. The witness was repairing a sprinkler head right here on a small hill overlooking the tee box. He saw the man, the same man that he saw come out of the house, remove these 2 gloves from his golf bag and throw them in the trash basket. Question, said Judge Gantry. At the moment he tossed these gloves, was he wearing another set of gloves? It was obvious to the Boones that the judge had dissected every detail of the story. I've never asked him that question. Probably so, Woods. It's not unusual for a golfer to keep extra gloves in his bag. Why would that matter? Said Mrs. Boone. I'm not sure that it would. I'm just very curious right now, Marcella. There was a long pause as if the president were thinking the same, but nobody wanted to mention it. Finally, Theo said, Judge, you could always ask the witness. He's here? Yes, sir. He's here. He's in my office, Henry. Remember, Judge Gantry's name is Henry, said Mrs. Boone. He's now represented by the Boone law firm. Does that include Theo? Said Judge Gantry, and everyone thought it was somehow funny. You have to assure us, Henry, though, that he will not be arrested and he will not be prosecuted for anything. You have my word, said Judge Gantry. Bobby Escobar came into the room. He sat across the table from the judge. To his left was his cousin Julio, who served as an interpreter. To his right was Aunt Carola. It was a family affair, apparently. Hector and Rita were back in Mrs. Boone's office watching television. Theo began his direct examination with the same aerial photo of the sixth fairway, creek course. With the red laser light, he and Bobby pinpointed the exact spot where he had been eating lunch. Theo changed photos, though, and he asked his questions carefully. He gave Julio plenty of time to translate. The story unfolded perfectly. Woods, Marcella, and Ike sat back and watched with enormous pride. But all three were ready to catch any mistake, too. Once the facts were established and Bobby had established himself as a reliable witness, Judge Gantry said, let's talk about identification. So he didn't describe the scene with the words, but he described it by suggestion that Theo cross-examined or examined with questions Bobby Escobar right there. And they're all like, he's such a little lawyer. He's like, that's our kid. He's such a little lawyer. Beautiful. Let's talk about identification. Since Bobby had never met Pete Duffy, he could not say he was the man who entered the house. He did say that the man was wearing a black sweater, tan slacks, a maroon golf cap, and the same outfit Pete Duffy was wearing at the time of the murder. Theo flashed up a series of photos of Pete Duffy. They were all taken from the newspaper. To each, Bobby could only say the man in the photo definitely resembled the man he's seen. Theo pressed another key and ran three quick videos he strung together, all showing Pete Duffy walking to the courthouse or walking out again. Bobby said he was almost certain he was the man. But then the clincher. The prosecution had placed into evidence 22 photographs of the crime scene, the house and the neighborhood. Of the photos... Of the photos, State's Exhibit number 15 had been taken from a position somewhere near the edge of the fairway. It showed the rear of the Duffy home, its patios, its windows, its rear door, and off to the far right there were two uniformed policemen standing next to a golf cart. Sitting in the golf cart was Pete Duffy, who appeared dazed and distraught. These were evidence photos taken by the police that they used in court. The photo had been apparently just taken minutes after he had raced home from the clubhouse grill and told that his wife had been found dead. Theo obtained the photograph by visiting, yes, they put in italics, quotation marks, the site maintained by the court reporting service. If Judge Gantry asked how he got it, Theo was prepared to say, well, Judge, it's been produced in an open court and admitted into evidence, so it's not really a secret, right? But Judge Gantry did not ask, luckily. He had seen the photo 100 times, and he was unmoved by it. Bobby, though, had never seen it. He immediately began speaking rapidly to Julio. Julio translated. That's him, Julio said. The man in the cart. That's him. Records show, Your Honor, that the witness has just identified the defendant, Mr. Peter Duffy. Thank you, Theo. I got it, said Judge Gantry. And that is the end of chapter 22. we'll lay it on because we're going for a finish. The spectators gathered Monday morning for the final drama. The jurors arrived with solemn faces, determined to finish the job. The lawyers wore their finest suits and appeared fresh and eager to get their verdict. The defendant himself looked rested, confident. The clerks and the bailiffs hustled about with their usual early morning energy. But when they grew still at 10 minutes after 9, the courtroom seemed to inhale and wait. Everyone stood when Judge Gentry entered, his black robe flowing behind him. "Please be seated," he said. He was not happy, and he seemed very tired. He looked around the courtroom, and he nodded at his court reporter. He acknowledged his jury. He noticed the crowd in particular. Looked at the third row, the right side. There was Theo Boone, wedged between his father, his uncle. Yes, he was absent from school for the moment. Judge Gantry looked at Theo, and their eyes locked. Then he leaned down a few inches close to the microphone. He cleared his throat and began to deliver the words no one expected. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At this point in the trial of Mr. Peter Duffy, we're scheduled to hear the closing arguments from the lawyer. However, this will not happen. For reasons I will not explain in this moment, I am declaring a mistrial." There were gasps, jolts, shocked expressions from all corners of the courtroom. Theo was watching Pete Duffy, whose jaw dropped to his chest as he turned to Clifford Nance. The lawyers on both sides appeared to have been hit between the eyes. Nobody saw this coming, all staggering as they tried to understand what they had just heard. On the front row, directly behind the defense table, Omar Cheap turned and looked straight at Theo. He didn't stare. He didn't look menacing. His timing said it all. "You did this. I know it, and I'm not finished." That's what he was saying with his eyes. He didn't actually say it. The jurors were not sure what would happen next, so Judge Gantry explained it to them. He turned, he looked at them and said, "Members of the jury, a mistrial means that the trial is over. The charges against Mr. Peter Duffy are dismissed, but only for the moment. The charges will be filed again, and there will be another trial in this very near future, and with a different jury. In any criminal trial, the judge has the absolute discretion to declare a mistrial when he or she believes that something has happened that might adversely affect the final verdict. This is the case now. I thank you for your service. You are important to our judicial system. However, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are now excused." The jurors were thoroughly bewildered. Some were beginning to understand that their civic duty was over. A bailiff herded them out the side door. They shuffled out. Theo watched and admired Judge Gantry. At that moment, Theo, decided he wanted to be a great judge too, just like his hero up on that bench. A judge who knew the law inside and out and believed in fairness, but more importantly, a judge who could make tough decisions. "I told you so," said Ike. Ike had been convinced that a mistrial would be declared, but then so had the rest of the Boone law firm. The jurors left, and no one else moved. They were stunned, and they wanted more information. At the same time, Jack Hogan and Clifford Nance rose slowly and looked at Judge Gantry. Before either of them could speak, he said, "Gentlemen, I'm not going to explain my actions at this time. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., we will meet in my office, and I will state my reasons. I want the charges refiled as soon as possible. I will schedule a retrial for the 3rd week in June. The defendant will remain free on bond, but with the same restrictions. Court is adjourned." Bang! He slapped his gavel on the bench, and he vanished. With the judge and the jury gone, there wasn't much left to do. The crowd slowly climbed to its feet and headed to the door. Mr. Boone said sternly to Theo, "Get to school, would ya?" Outside the courthouse, Theo unchained his bike. Ike said, "You stopping by this afternoon?" "Sure. It's Monday." "We need to debrief. It's been a long week." "Oh, it sure has." Not far away from the entrance, there was a noise. and a rush of people trying to get out of the courthouse. Pete Duffy, surrounded by his lawyers and others, hustled him away with a couple of reporters yelling questions at him. The questions were not answered. Omar Cheap brought up the rear and actually shoved one of the reporters. He was about to take off with his client when he noticed Theo straddling his bike and watching the drama with Ike. Cheap froze. And for a split second, he seemed undecided to what to do. Should he hurry and protect Mr. Duffy, or should he walk over to Theo and utter a vile threat? Theo and Cheap stared at each other 50 feet apart. Then Cheap turned and just scampered away. Ike seemed to not even notice this. Theo hurried away too. He headed for school, and once the courthouse was far behind him, he began to relax. He found it difficult to believe it was Monday. So much had happened in 7 days. The biggest trial in the town's history had come and gone, but it wasn't over. Thanks to Theo, a bad verdict had been avoided. Justice had been preserved, but for the time being. He would take a break from his duties, but before long he would be meeting with Bobby Escobar and Julio, no doubt about it. Theo would be in charge of coaching Bobby, preparing him for the 3 hours he would spend on the witness stand in June. And now Omar the Creep, is what he called him instead of Omar Cheap, was complicating things. How much did he and his client and Clifford Nance really know? Questions, questions, questions. Theo was puzzled, but he was also excited. He thought of his friend April Finnemore. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the judge would be issuing a ruling requiring to live with one parent or the other. His presence would not be required in the court, but she was having a hard time. He needed to spend some time with his friend. He decided that he would sneak away at lunch and talk about things. And he thought about Woody, whose brother was in jail and likely to stay there. He parked his bike at the flagpole and walked into school halfway through first period. He had a written excuse from his mother, and he handed it to the secretary at the front office and noticed she wasn't smiling. She had always smiled. "Miss Gloria?" "Theo, you have a seat," she said. "Why?" "It's just a simple matter of being late." "How was the funeral?" she said, unsmiling. He tried to understand, then he remembered what his Uncle Ike had done. "I'm sorry. The funeral last Friday. The one your uncle came here for?" "Oh, it was great. It was a real blast." She looked around nervously and tapped her lips. "Please speak softly," she was saying. There were open doors nearby. "Theo, my brother was stopped last night for driving under the influence of alcohol. They took him to jail." She rolled her eyes to make sure that they were alone. "I'm sorry," said Theo, whispering, but he knew where this was going. "He's not a drunk. He's a grown man with a wife and a kid and a good job. He's never been in trouble. We don't know what to do." "What was his blood alcohol content?" "What?" "His blood alcohol content." Oh, that. Does .09 sound right?" "The limit is .08, so he's in trouble." "First offense?" "Oh, heavens, yes, Theo. He's not a drunk. He barely had 2 glasses of wine." 2 drinks. Always 2 drinks. Regardless of how drunk or sloppy or belligerent, they've never had more than 2 drinks, Theo thought to himself. "The policeman said he could get 10 days in jail. This is so embarrassing." "Which policeman?" "How am I supposed to know, Theo?" "Some of the policemen like to scare people. Your brother will not get 10 days. He'll pay a fine of $600. He'll lose his license for 6 months. He has to go to driving school, and a year from now his record can be expunged. It can be erased." "Did he spend the entire night in jail?" "Oh, yes, I can't imagine." "Then there's no more jail time. Write down this name. Taylor Baskin. He's the lawyer who handles all the drunks." "He's not a drunk, Theo." He said a bit too loud. Both looked around to see if anyone was listening. No one. "Sorry, Taylor Baskin is the drunk driving lawyer, Miss Gloria. Your brother needs to call him." "I need to get to class," Theo said. "Thank you, Theo. Please don't tell anyone." "Not a problem. I'm going to go, okay?" "Oh, yes, and..." "Thanks, Theo." He scampered out of the office, leaving behind another satisfied client. And that is the end of Theodore Boone, Kid Lawyer. Thank you for hanging with me with this amazing book. It's like Courtroom 101. Omar Cheap obviously is going to play into the other books. And his next book is The Abduction. We read page 1 at the very beginning of this video. They had a preview page of it in the back of this book. Get you to buy the next one. And it was April Finnemore had been abducted. And then the last, they have another preview called The Scandal. It says, even a future star lawyer like Theodore Boone has to deal with statewide standardized testing. What? School scandal. I think The Abduction sounds a little more exciting. The Abduction, though, is if you can, the accused... Oh, here are all of them. The accused, the activist, the fugitive... Oh, wow. Listen to this preview. In his book, The Fugitive, on a field trip to Washington, D.C., Theo spots a familiar face on the train, the metro. Accused murderer and fugitive Pete Duffy, who jumped bail and was never seen again. Theo's quick thinking helped bring Duffy back to Strattonburg to stand trial. But now that Duffy knows who he is, Theo's in greater danger than ever before. Even when everything's on the line, Theodore Boone will stop at nothing to make sure there is justice. That's the book, The Fugitive. So I guess these stories continue on in other threads, but I'm just doing this one for you to introduce you to Courtroom 101 and a genre of novels called the thriller. And this is the court thriller. Obviously, a more age-appropriate one. He wrote it for kids aged 10 to 12. That's what he wrote it for. So that does have some topics that are controversial, such as somebody getting murdered. You know what I mean? Like nice books. People don't get murdered in nice books. But he does keep it clean. You can technically say it's for 10 to 12. All right, it's 11:01. I'm late. I'll see you guys in math, 4th grade and 5th grade.